What's up, everyone? We're here for trade deadline day, Locked On Bucks. There was also a game as well. The Bucks have just gone down to the Suns a couple of minutes ago here. Not the best showing for Milwaukee, particularly on the defensive end in the NBA Finals matchup. We'll talk about that a little bit first. And of course, we'll have to talk about Serge Ibaka coming to Milwaukee. We wondered if there was going to be a trade. We wondered if there was going to be a big man coming to Milwaukee, and Serge Ibaka is that guy. Also, an injury to Pat Connaughton late in the game against Phoenix, so we're going to get to that. There's plenty to discuss. Let's get started.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN. And joining me, the founder of BrewHoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden. And we do thank you always for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every day. And there is going to be plenty of people interested to hear about the big trade that went down today. Also, the Finals rematch with the Suns, Pat Connaughton's injury. Like we said, there's plenty to discuss. We appreciate you guys for jumping on with us. Frank, we will get to the trade. We'll start with this game. We are recording this, as I said, just minutes after this one is finished. Milwaukee 131-107. They go down to the Suns. They finished this road trip 3-1, but this was the big game. This was always going to be the challenge. We knew the Suns were going to be motivated. You did tweet about it during the fourth quarter there. We discussed in previous days, Frank, that the Bucks were winning. The offense was firing on all cylinders, but perhaps defensively, they weren't at their best. And you come up against the Phoenix team that really has been a juggernaut for most of this regular season. And they weren't slowing them down too much, let's say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny to think back to the finals, and game 2, the Bucks came out. I think, was it game 2 they came out switching a bunch? I think it was, right? And that was I think that was the Bucks' worst performance of the finals, I want to say. And we've seen the Bucks. It seems like the Bucks, like Bud just decided, like 10 days ago that the Bucks were just going to switch everything for, I don't know, a few weeks or something just to kind of get back to that. And they hadn't gone to it very much. For some time, we'd seen them doing a lot of blitzing and hard hedging. And, it just seems like they've been trying to work on kind of the switching defense. But, I mean, the Suns just obliterated the Bucks switching tonight. And, we hear, the idea of the Bucks being too small has come up a lot. And I saw a lot of that in my mentions. And it's like, well, I mean, you could be starting Bill Russell, but if you're switching him on to the point guard every time, then he's not going to be able to do anything against, Drew Holiday and Wes Matthews and all these guys getting switched onto Andre Ayton, under the rim, right? The Bucks have not really gotten killed. I mean, I can't remember a game in which a team was able to exploit the Bucks switching the way that Phoenix was tonight. Ayton just gave it to them repeatedly. JaVale McGee had some buckets. Bismack Biyombo had some buckets. I mean, they just did an awesome job. When the Bucks were getting into their switches, I mean, they were rolling really hard early, and then they were, taking advantage of the switches and it's getting deep post position. And, kudos to the Suns. I mean, they just said, all right, if you're going to do that, like, we're just going to punch you in the mouth. And, 68 paint points for Phoenix.
I was about to ask because they didn't actually shoot the ball well. So I was thinking the numbers must have been astronomical. Then that's
yeah. I mean, they shot 70% on 2-pointers today. Right. I mean, if you told me that the Suns would shoot 9 out of 30 on threes, I would say, oh, okay, you got a chance. But, with the Bucks just sort of saying, all right, we're just going to switch everything. It was just curtains. And, I think, again, like, you can say, well, should Bud have adjusted? They like Giannis was playing center field in the third quarter on a few possessions. You might guys, the sun block, which was not when DeAndre Ayton rolled to the rim and caught an alley-oop and dunked on Giannis. That was probably the another sign that this was just not going to go the Bucks' way tonight. That was not a switch, obviously. That was Giannis playing more conventional kind of drop defense, and that didn't work either. But they were, for the most part, seemed like they were just like, all right, you know what, like we're going to be content to either let Chris Paul shoot and Devin Booker shoot mid-range jumpers against our bigs, or try to beat our small guys with post-ups in the lane. And obviously in the finals, when the Bucks switched, it was usually those guard isolation plays where the Bucks really got hurt. But in this game, it was the big guys going to eat down low. So we'll talk about Serge Ibaka. I mean, again, tactically, Serge Ibaka, if he's switching, can't stop that either because again, you're choosing to put your big guy away from the basket. But we'll see. We can talk about that a little more. But yeah, I mean, I think again, just Phoenix is the best team in the league right now. At least from a regular season standpoint, and the fact that they did what they did tonight without shooting the ball well at all, just sort of underscores obviously how well they've been playing. And the Bucks, Drew and Chris ended up putting up, solid lines, 21 points. They both shot better than 50% from the field. But Giannis just, after 2 months basically straight of playing just super consistently offensively, he just did not have the type of scoring that we expect. Didn't shoot well from the foul line, 5 for 14 from the field. I think he started 2 out of 2 from the field. So he must have 3 for 12 to end. It's a lot of missed shots. And, Phoenix played a bunch of big guys tonight. Giannis was getting most of them into foul trouble, it felt like, but we saw Ayton, we saw JaVale McGee, we saw Bismack Biyombo. We saw those guys playing 2 at a time at various points. So yeah, I mean, again, makes sense, right? I mean, the Bucks basically, other than Game 5, never seemed to win in Phoenix over the last few decades. So I wasn't expecting a win tonight. Would have been nice for them to be a little more competitive. They started well, but once those 3-point, once the kickouts for threes started drying up, things kind of quickly took a turn. And again, trading missed threes for 3-foot layups is not a great way to try to win a basketball game.
No, it's not. And I agree. The first quarter, particularly Drew Holiday, was pretty spectacular in the first 6 minutes of this game on both ends of the floor. But maybe it's kind of similar to what we've seen in previous games. I was thinking to myself, okay, well, Phoenix is scoring here. So if the Bucks do go through a rough patch, it might get pretty difficult. I thought early in the third quarter, they actually came out of halftime and both teams were kind of cold, but Grayson Allen had a couple of wide open 3-point attempts though. And when they weren't going, it felt like that was the missed opportunity. The Bucks really did need a surge to get Ibaka into this game to get. I don't know if I said that right, but anyway, you get what I'm trying to roll with there. But Serge wasn't there, so unfortunately, they weren't getting Ibaka in this game. But before we move to the trade, we'll do that after the first break. We'll talk about Ibaka, all that. Pat Connaughton, I know you've been on the In Street Clothes, which is just a brilliant website. Let's be honest. I mean, it has all the information when it comes to injury. 4th metacarpal, and as you correctly pointed out to me, and you called me Dr. Pittman in the DM, I was calling it a finger, and I was mixing up my metacarpals and my phalanges. But in simple terms, this is a broken hand for Pat, and obviously it's bad timing. We can get into why it's bad timing with the rotation and stuff moving forward, but you don't want to see this. This is the last thing you need.
Yeah, it's add injury to insult, right? Is yes. what we saw tonight. And I believe the 4th metacarpal is your ring, basically this bone here underneath your ring finger, I believe is what it is. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, again, just doing cursory internet research, 4th metacarpal fractures per the In Street Clothes database. And this was actually Jeff Stotts, who runs this great website and, is just catalogs every injury and how long guys come back from it in the NBA. This was actually from 2015, so this is going back quite a ways. But at that point of when he wrote it, I mean, there's 20, excuse me, 20 guys on there that in the sample. So it's a pretty big sample size, and probably more than not didn't have surgery, but a decent number also had surgery. It seems like it's sort of at that, in between point where sometimes guys get surgery, sometimes don't. We'll see what Pat gets, whether he gets it or not. And the average was 17 games missed. So again, that's probably, I don't know, 6 weeks, something like that, something in that range. I think another article I wrote said, these metacarpal injuries, 3 to 6 weeks at the absolute best, 6 weeks. I think Aaron Baines, one example was 4 weeks with surgery or something like that. So again, good news and bad news. Good news is we're just at the start of February. So hopefully, most optimistically mid-March, less optimistically start of April, sometime before the playoffs start, obviously is the most important thing. But I mean, you just traded away one of your wings, right? One of the whole reasons why I think I was more maybe just hold on to Donte was, you're one injury away from, having your wing depth challenged. And, sure enough, whatever, 8 hours after you trade Donte DiVincenzo, your your most important bench wing ends up breaking his hand, and again, it's a big loss even if he's only out for a month. So shout out to Pat Connaughton. You just sort of hope that his prognosis is good and he comes back. And again, he shot the ball so well this year. He was shooting the ball really poorly tonight, and I think he hit a three. I assume it was right before he injured the hand, which I think was with he got locked up with Chris Paul defensively, I think. But again, just this stuff kind of happens. To be honest, I'm amazed this doesn't happen more often.
I was about to say that.
Especially you look at like some of Giannis, his fingers are so long. I'm just like, how does it not just how do none of those bones never break, right? And obviously it's because they're enormously powerful, strong professional athletes. But I don't know. It's just fortunate that this stuff maybe just doesn't happen more often. But yeah, just fingers crossed that Pat comes back on the the better side of the estimates, and that he doesn't lose his shooting touch while he's out, which again, it's his right hand, it's his dominant hand. That's obviously just really not what you would have wanted right now, given the way he's been playing and given how important he's been.
No doubt. Let's get into this trade after I talk about betonline.net. And this remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. They have all the props, all the odds, all the lines, and more than ever before, particularly in the lead up to the Super Bowl here, a couple of days away if you're interested in that. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of the current game. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. It's Super Week, brought to you by Get Upside. And there's no better place to get coverage of the big game than the Locked On NFL podcast, Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams. They're both in LA, and they have been all week covering the big game right through to Sunday. So make sure you check out those podcasts if you're interested. But trade deadline, Frank, I used to be crazy about this, and I used to stay up all night and check the notifications and go crazy. This morning, not the case. So trade deadline is at 7 a.m. here in Australia on Friday morning. I had to get up at 6:30 for work anyway, but I woke up at about 3 o'clock in the morning, checked out DM to see what you maniacs were talking about, and I realized you were talking about Donte DiVincenzo, and he was traded. And yesterday on the show with Justin, I think by the end of the show, I said, look, I don't know. I suspect Donte is probably going to get moved for someone. I don't know what it'll be. We discussed a lot of players potentially. Serge Ibaka wasn't one of those. I remember a few weeks ago, Frank, in our chat, just randomly, I was like, what's Serge Ibaka up to? Is he even playing? And it's kind of one of those weird things because he's been out for too long. And I guess the Bucks have gone by the old adage. If you have one 7-footer with a wrecked back, you may as well trade for another 7-footer with a wrecked back. And they've brought Serge Ibaka into the fold. No, I'm only kidding, obviously. But Serge Ibaka has played 35 games this year for the Clippers. But just the details on the trade from a Bucks point of view anyway. Donte DiVincenzo goes to the Kings. I was considering just rolling out the podcast I did with Locked On Kings about 18 months ago, where we talked about his fit with Sacramento. But Donte gets to the Kings, as well as Rodney Hood and Semi Ojeleye go to the Clippers. The Bucks picked up a couple of second-round draft picks. You've probably got the details on those, Frank, and some cash as well as. But Serge Ibaka here is the big ticket item, so we should start there, I guess. Muted there, but I'm sure you're about to make a very, very good point there, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, he's actually had a couple of better games of late. He had a 20-point game last week. I think he had a 14-point game last week as well. So, he started 10 games out, I think 35 for the Clippers this year. But I mean, he's basically the third center on that team, with Isaiah Hartenstein really kind of breaking out as kind of the backup behind Zubac. So yeah, I mean, and when you think about it, I think the Clippers are saving like $30 million in tax money by shipping his salary out, which, again, is a almost $10 million salary. Given a trade kicker, it'll be a little over 10 for the Bucks. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, can Serge Ibaka play center at the highest level during the playoffs? I don't know. We know he has in the past. We know he's been a guy that has won an NBA championship, a guy that has, been a key piece of, and a battle tested piece of really good playoff teams. He in certainly when he was a little bit younger, the fact that he had, pretty good mobility for a rim protector obviously was one of his selling points. And the fact that, he's got a pretty good 3-point shot gives him an important dimension offensively, just being able to keep teams honest. And, that's obviously always been an important thing for the Bucks that they look for from their big guys. So, I think on paper he fits very nicely as, a certainly at least a regular season fill-in for Brook Lopez. But again, like, what is he going to be in the playoffs? Is he going to be a guy that, you want to play in crunch time in the playoffs, especially with Brook Lopez's status uncertain? I don't know. And I think that was the part that, we talked about it. I think you and Justin talked about it. I kind of was struggling with like, would they really use Donte as their main trade piece to acquire a center?
Right.
Given that they still seem to think that they're getting Brook Lopez back in the regular season, then he'll be back for the playoffs. And so, again, they have not played two traditional centers in the playoffs really since Robin Lopez against the Magic in the bubble, I guess technically, right? Like Rolo didn't play at all in the Miami series. They, basically went away from playing kind of both Lopez brothers. And obviously last year they didn't have two traditional centers, right? You had Giannis and Bobby and Brook, and then PJ as sort of like this, hybrid big / wing defender / defend whoever. So, so I was, on the one hand, I was a little surprised because, like, wow, they're really cashing in there. Not only are they cashing in Donte for a center, which is very valuable from a regular season perspective, but what is that guy going to mean in the playoffs? But then the fact that, they're adding a ton of cost to their books by doing this deal. When you weigh in the multiplying factor of the luxury tax and where they are, I think including the increased salary that they're going to be paying. It's something like $11 million in increased costs that the Bucks are taking on by making this move. And part of that too is, just opening up roster spots. You're going to have to fill the roster spots and spend some more money that way, which there's some positive in that from a roster standpoint. But they clearly think Serge Ibaka can help them because they're spending a lot of money to add him, to bring him into the fold. And, we heard the quotes from the after practice today or after shoot around today. Everybody seems very excited about it. And, we'll see here when they come back from the road trip, we'll get our chance to see him. He played against the Bucks the other night and looked perfectly fine, right? So, it seems like he's healthy coming back from the back injury. But, again, I think there's still question marks here about just how good he's going to be. And part of that's, just sort of a question of him, but also just tactically about the Bucks and their rotations and, Brook and all that. So I don't know. And as far as like, what does this say about Brook and concerns about his, I don't know. Right. It doesn't, sorry, I wouldn't say that it makes me more optimistic about Brook Lopez coming back, but I don't really think it makes me less optimistic either. Cause I think given Serge's mobility, I think he's probably less likely to be a guy that just is like going to be benched for an entire playoff series or something like that because of like matchups and things like that. But you never know. So I don't know. I last year I was very optimistic about PJ Tucker and that acquisition because I thought he just fit really well, but he also had played really poorly during the season. So it's a little bit interesting because last year with the PJ move, I was very optimistic on the fit. I was somewhat concerned just about like is he washed? Like, can he still play? ? Just given what had happened in Houston with Serge, there's a little bit of that concern around just, his physical health and his aging and things like that. But I think probably then the other piece that we have this year is just like, exactly how is his fit and, how crucial of a piece is he's going to be. I just don't see him being like, the kind of needle mover that PJ was last year in the playoffs. But that said, certainly he can be very useful, certainly over this next stretch of regular season, however long, we're still going to be waiting for Brook.
So if we go back a couple of years ago, this is a continued trend of the Bucks picking up 4s or 5s around this time of year. Pau Gasol didn't quite work out. Marvin Williams, I think a victim of circumstance. Difficult to really get a read on that situation.
They never switched Marvin Williams. Marvin Williams playing drop.
playing
Still,
drop.
I feel bad for Marvin. Feel bad.
Me
They
too.
didn't use him much. He was fine. He was perfectly fine.
Yeah, I don't want to give that one a negative grade because I don't hold it all against him. PJ Tucker, again, like you said, yeah, I think that one worked out okay. I think that one gets a tick, but it's the same conversation. How washed is Marvin Williams? How washed is PJ Tucker? How washed is Serge Ibaka? They're different players. We'll continue discussing this after I talk about Shopify. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big businesses, so upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online, in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey full of endless possibilities, just like the endless possibilities the Bucks now have with Serge Ibaka. And believe me, this podcast started out selling down on the lower end of the scale, but now we are just absolutely on fire here on Locked On Bucks. And remember, success is a million milestones on a forever evolving path. Like mine, Shopify powers millions of businesses from first sale to full scale. Reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. Go to shopify.com/lockedonnba. That's all lowercase for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/lockedonnba right now. That's shopify.com/lockedonnba. I'm telling you, after that ad read, I need a Built Bar. I'm out of energy, which is good because Built Bar also is a long-time sponsor of this podcast. And if you haven't tried the Puffs yet, then you're simply missing out, in my opinion, one of the best tasting bars that Built Bar have. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they are a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Of course, we know Built Bar's a low-calorie, high-protein. Just replace your normal candy bar with Built Bar. You'll be better for it. They are good for you. There's no doubt about it. Heaps of flavors. Go check it out at built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. So just on Serge Ibaka, and you basically hit on it, but when we were discussing this yesterday, my big problem with the Bucks trading Donte DiVincenzo, and we just used the example of Mo Bamba because there's always a buzz player that, Bucks Twitter or whoever it is falls in love with. And then all of a sudden, one person starts it, and next thing, the whole of Bucks Twitter thinks that Mo Bamba is the answer to all the questions. And my thing was, well, for the Bucks this year, if you're trading Donte DiVincenzo, you want to be trading him for a guy that you think can help you this year win the title. And I understand that you have to keep an eye to the future. But when I had people responding to me saying, well, Mo Bamba can be the center of the future, I was like, well, I don't really care about that right now because Donte DiVincenzo is in the rotation. I think he can help this team this year. So Serge Ibaka spoke about Bobby Portis, and we should give Bobby Portis some credit. He got switched onto Chris Paul tonight. He stayed in front of him. He blocked that mid-range jump shot. So let's give Bobby some credit. But I think that Serge Ibaka is a guy that they view as a genuine rim protector, a guy that can play, sort of stay at home a little bit more and actually intimidate. Let's just say the Bucks haven't had the most intimidating defense around the rim outside of Giannis, who's been playing in different positions. So I think that that's probably how they view it. And as you said, I think that they think that he is a guy that's going to help them right away and help them this year. In a best case scenario, Brook Lopez comes back and then you just have the option of Serge Ibaka. But I'm sure if they were going to trade for a big man, they are also probably planning for worst case scenario. And the Bucks may be looking at a situation where Serge Ibaka is the guy that they're going to have to lean on to play that defensive role. And all these splits are fine offensively. He's been low volume, but 68% at the rim, 39% from three. So as you said, he does space the floor a little bit. As far as Donte goes, well, actually, the interesting part about this trade is the roster spots as well, because they were also able to move on Rodney Hood and Semi Ojeleye. Let's be honest, they tried. It didn't work out for both of those guys. We said at the start of the year they were going to be X factors. If they give you something, that's cool. If they don't, you're probably not going to be shocked. They didn't. But I do think that this means that the Bucks are probably adding a guy. And when you move on Donte DiVincenzo, it's probably a guard. And I think that there's probably a need for some George Hill insurance at this point as well. So when you look at it from the situation of Donte and moving him on, and then just the whole roster, how do you view it as it currently stands?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the fact that you dump the two guys that have been, probably the most underwhelming, at the end of the roster, is kind of a bonus and helps you clear a couple of spots. I mean, now that you have three open roster spots is pretty interesting, especially because Greg Monroe probably does not survive to another 10-day, given that you just added Serge Ibaka. By the way, I think we got
Yep.
Greg Monroe's first and one. This should have headlined in this podcast. I think he had his first and one since returning to the Bucks in like the last 20 seconds of tonight's game. I don't know if you caught that, Kane, because
I wasn't watching at that point.
You're setting up.
I was not watching.
So one last and one for the road.
Damn it.
But yeah, I mean, I think the obvious interesting question is what happens next. I mean, when the trade happened, the first thing I was thinking was what we were just discussing. Of like, well, I don't think they're going to kind of cash in all their chips for a center because that center may not play if Brook comes back.
Mhm.
But landing these 2 second-round picks is basically sort of like kind of splitting the atom on this a little bit because, you got back a couple of, future assets again. I think the second one is, I believe it's Sacramento's. I think it's 2024 second round pick. The first one is less favorable. I think 2023. So one like kind of late second round and one potential better second round.
You
pick.
don't have faith in the Kings? What is wrong with you?
So my first thought was, okay, they're probably not done. What else might they do? Do they,
Right.
package Jordan Nwora and a second round pick for some cheap guy that's maybe useful, or 2 second round picks, wherever it might be, right? I mean, we're however many months removed from the Bucks taking 2 second round picks and Sam Merrill and turning that into Grayson Allen, right? So, and granted, we had a trade exception involved in that trade, which allowed them to acquire a more expensive player than they could have done today. But I was kind of curious, like, oh, they must be trying to make another move here to potentially add a wing or a point guard. Obviously, it doesn't happen. So you still have these 2 picks kind of burning a hole in your pocket for the summer. So again, that was an opportunity that you weren't able to take advantage of in terms of improving the team now. So yeah, I mean, I think again, you kind of break it up. It's you get a player that hopefully still has a fair bit left in the tank and helps you in the regular season, and then gives you something in the playoffs in Serge Ibaka, addressing your big man issues. You've got these 2 second round picks, which now become just future assets. We'll see what they use them for potentially as soon as this summer. And then the other piece is, as you said, you open up a couple more roster spots so that you can go out and be active on the buyout market. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, tonight, Donte DiVincenzo's gone. George Hill is out with this neck injury, which, sounded like from Bud's comments, he may just miss basically the rest of this homestand going into the All-Star break, and they may just give him that full run to get healthy. So, I mean, Lindell Wigginton's playing minutes tonight, like first half minutes. Okay. That's the state of your guard depth right now, is your two-way guy. I mean, we got used to this early in the season when Justin Robinson had to play a ton. Well, we're back at that point because Donte DiVincenzo is traded and George Hill is out, and suddenly, oh yeah, you really don't have much guard depth in terms of ball handling. And I mean, Wigginton, I guess, was okay, right? I mean, he hit a couple shots, so kudos to him. When it was his first real chance at playing, meaningful minutes in the NBA. But clearly they need another ball handler. And obviously, we've been talking all year about, do they have a big wing or really any wing, especially with Connaughton now out, anybody that can be, even just as, a 2-3 shooter type guy to kind of plug in. And the challenge is buyout guys usually aren't that good, that good, right? So, we'll talk a lot more about this sort of in the coming weeks here. Guys have to be waived unless I think it's still the same dates as previously, generally by the end of March, in order to be playoff eligible if they sign with another team. So, we'll see who's in that group. It sounds like Goran Dragic is going to be in that group. Dennis Schroeder, it sounds like, is going to be in that group. DeAndre Bembry was released today. If you're thinking about wings by the Nets, again, you're not finding Pat Connaughton, a Pat Connaughton clone in that group, unfortunately. But again, some pretty good players are going to hit free agency as buyout guys, and then the question is just, can you convince them to come to Milwaukee? And again, I mean, if you landed a Goran Dragic, I'd say you feel way better about your backcourt depth, and you probably feel like, hey, I don't, for whatever his limitations and his age, that's a pretty good backfill for Donte DiVincenzo, all things considered. So we'll see. I mean, I think the buyout guys are going to be interesting to watch, but you're not getting your PJ Tucker replacement in the buyout market, as far as at least I would expect. Maybe you can get one guy, maybe you get a guard that can give you something, add some depth, but for the most part, I mean, again, I think this is more or less the team that is going to have to be the group that carries you to this title defense. And again, tonight's game, just a reminder of how kind of fragile these rotations and health can be, right? And you just hope that Pat comes back in a month or something, and that you don't lose any of your other guys for an extended period, and that you obviously get Brook back.
Yeah, well, there's two things typically that can attract these buyout guys, and this is the area the Bucks have been able to move themselves into over the last few
Built
seasons.
Bars?
They, you have a local podcast that's sponsored by Built Bar. That's obviously a factor. But factor number two is you have to be a winning team. Obviously, the Bucks fit that bill. And secondly, a lot of the times the competitive advantage is having a role that you think guys can play. And if you're a point guard, if you are a Dragic or you are a Schroeder, you could probably look at the Bucks and say, okay, well, I can see that there's an opportunity for me to play. So I expect that they'll be at least in the running for some of those guys. We know Bud has that connection with Schroeder. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. But obviously, those two guys, as you mentioned, are the ones that are at they're probably the most prominent names right now anyway, that you might look at the Bucks needing or having their fit for. So don't forget to check out the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Like I said, obviously, Super Bowl coming up on Sunday. You might want to check out the podcast. Maybe they've got some tips. I don't know. Listen to it. After you listen to Locked On Bucks, see what they got to say. Frank, second time this week I've had you on past midnight. I know sometimes I joke about it, but there is no one more committed than Frank Madden.
Well, before we go, and we should shout out on, I think it kind of got buried in trade deadline and the game tonight, but our friend Eric Name had the first real interview with Brook Lopez. I think Shams had like a really brief thing that told us nothing, but Eric had a really pretty detailed long Q&A with Brook Lopez that he published.
Didn't know
to
it,
The Athletic.
And I haven't seen it, so I'll go check it out.
Exactly. I didn't even see it. Someone else mentioned that Eric put it. Eric did.
Yeah.
I didn't see it in Eric's Twitter feed. We didn't talk about it with him. So yeah, it's definitely a good read. I mean, he talks a bit about the surgery that was done, that it was for a bulging disc, and apparently he described it as them shaving off a little bit of the disc and then healing. So again, I'm just scrolling through. I don't think there's any let's just say earth-shattering news in here. There's a lot of kind of what Brook has done sort of in his spare time. There's a lot of Curb Your Enthusiasm. I appreciate it. I mean, I did my whole Curb Your Enthusiasm GIF summaries of the Bucks preseason, so I enjoyed the Curb. So again, if you're looking for Brook's return date, unfortunately, that's not in there. But again, I mean, I think the mere fact that Brook is doing an interview that's being published, it's not bad. They're at least not trying to completely hide him here. And again, it seems like he's in a good place. Again, we probably would have said that, in mid-November.
Okay, Bud.
Yeah.
Okay,
Brook's in a good place. He's progressing. Yeah, I just feel Brook, for the person he is. Yeah, whatever. I've never done a Bud impression before, but that's
by the way, you brought up Curb Your Enthusiasm. I don't know if you saw my tweet tonight, but Budenholzer's challenge on a Wigginton foul, the way that he looked at the official, I described that as a spite challenge. That was a spite challenge from Bud. He just wanted to prove a point to the officials. He didn't care that the fact that it was a foul on Lindell Wigginton, which in the grand scheme of things, no offense to Lindell, congratulations for getting rotation minutes in an NBA Finals rematch, but that's not a foul you really need to challenge. Although it's turned out to be an inadvertent whistle, and they got a jump ball at center court. But that was a spite challenge from Bud. Some of the looks he gives these officials, utter disgust the way he looks at these officials. So shout out to Bud.
And why don't I just I'll just give like the I mean, probably the most interesting part is his description. So here's Brooks' description of the actual surgery. He said there was a bit of a bulging disc in my lower back, so they just went in there and kind of shaved that piece off. Love how casually that is. So then it was just about that disc healing, getting strong, and then from there doing the right exercises, workouts and stuff to where I'd have a good core, literally going forward and being prepared to play basketball. So again, and I actually didn't know this, but Eric references that it'd been in 15 years ago, he had surgery on a bulging disc before his freshman year at Stanford. And he said, yeah, I had it and it went well the first time around. So I wasn't super nervous. I had a great doctor in LA. Dr. Watkins is incredible, the best at this in the world. So he had a great program. He's had a great program for the situation. He uses it with everyone, professional athletes, movie actors, stuntmen, all sorts of stuff. So we know this stuff works. So we had a plan in place and we followed it. So it's been great. And I don't think I see I don't know if Eric mentioned, I mean, I think I've heard a reference that it's I believe a microdiscectomy. I believe that's what it's called. So unless I completely mispronounced that, I thought in my head that that's what it was, but feel free to Google that and tell me if I was wrong. But you know, again,
microvasectomy is a little bit too much information.
Disectomy.
Okay.
I'm Googling. Is it very common, if not the most common surgery performed by spine surgeons? Okay. Removing a portion of the intervertebral disc. Yep, that sounds like what you described. Okay, microdiscectomy. There you go.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. I'm going to go check out that story. Make sure you do that. Obviously, always support Eric Name. That's the one thing you should be doing if you're a Bucks fan. Let's wrap it up. We've reached the weekend. It's been a big week. All-Star weekend coming up as well, but plenty to get to still. How many games they got, Frank? They got a couple of games before the All-Star break. A couple at home, I believe. So we'll get to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got the the Blazers on Monday. So they've got a few days off here. They've got the Blazers on Monday, the Pacers on Tuesday. Both of these are home games, so a rare back-to-back at home against two teams that are obviously kind of, you know, let's say retooling right now. And then before the All-Star break, they get the Sixers at home on Thursday. So
Jimmy,
that will be a very interesting game with James Harden's hamstrings probably suddenly feeling better. And then the All-Star break, and they come back. Next game after the All-Star break is February 26th against the Nets. So, you know, the All-Star break at least does them a little bit of service in terms of the Pat Connaughton, some free 10 days or so for him to kind of rehab. But yeah, Sixers for the All-Star break, then they play home against the Nets, and whatever the Nets are going to look like on February 26th. You presumably, you know, miss Kevin Durant one more time, so hopefully you have a good chance there to rack up another win against the Nets. And then you get the Hornets at home, try to get a little revenge for that home 2-game sweep that the Bucks had against the Hornets. And then you host the Heat on March 2nd, which I believe is the last game between the ace-leading Heat and the Bucks this season. So, yeah, let's just say Blazers, Pacers, chance to chop a couple wins before you have that interesting matchup with the Sixers before the break.
All right. Have a good weekend, Frank. Everyone else have a good weekend. We'll be back next week. I'm tired. Let's end this podcast right here for Frank and myself. Take it easy, everyone. We'll catch you next week.